First of all, I'd just like to welcome everyone for returning again to this, our second session of our Vincentian Values Week. And as Rihanna has just said, today's session is going to be led by Sister Maureen. Sister Maureen is our Vincentian Formation Coordinator here at Daughters of Charity Services. And today she's going to explain the core characteristics common to Vincentian organizations and their shared values, which of course are drawn from the legacy of Vincent and Louise. So, Sister Maureen, I'm going to hand it over to you now. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you very much. So I think I can screen share, can I, Rihanna?
Yeah, you should be able to.
Okay, let's see if it comes up. Now, where is it? Sorry. I don't know where I'm just going to. Sorry, I was trying to screen share and it didn't come up. Where are you? You're there. All right, now share, come on. Aha, here we are. Okay, so I hope everyone can hear me. So good afternoon. As Sister Margaret introduced, I'm Sister Maureen Tinkler. I'm a daughter of Charity, and I'm the VIVAT Values Programme Coordinator at the Daughter of Charity Services. So it's a joy to be here with you, because whether we are a CEO of a Vincentian service, a staff member, a service user, a client or a resident, a Vincentian priest or a daughter of charity, a layperson or a volunteer, we are all connected to each other in a special way because we belong to the worldwide Vincentian family. This presentation is the second session in our Vincentian Values Week. And for the next 30 minutes or so, we will be reflecting on the topic of Vincentian values today. If we want to look at our Vincentian values, out of which we live and serve, we have to first go back to the source of their inspiration. We have to go back to Vincent and Louise. These two wonderful people lie at the root of our Vincentian family tree. They lie at the heart of our collective DNA and the holistic service that we provide. We need to return to their beginnings and their cultures and backgrounds, because this is what made them the people they became. We're all familiar with their stories. They're part of the oral tradition of the Vincentian family, which gets handed on from generation to generation. But we know they were as different as chalk and cheese. They were totally different. We are all familiar with John Gray's bestseller, Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus. Men and women, as we know, think and behave differently. And Vincent and Louise were no different. Here, if we look at the map of France, we see Paris. And Louise was born on the outskirts of Paris in 1591. Vincent, on the other hand, was born in southwest France, near Dax, in 1581. He was 10 years older than Louise. Their backgrounds were totally different. They came from social classes which were poles apart. So 17th century French society was structured in a hierarchical fashion, just like the pyramid on this slide. It was ruled top down, with the king, the church, and the aristocracy at the apex, and the peasants or the workers at the bottom. It was also a patriarchal society where men held the primary power and dominated in spheres of political leadership, moral authority, social privilege, and control of property. In a nutshell, in the French society of their time, men held the power and women in many ways were seen as inferiors. It's interesting to note that Vincent was not a typical man of his times. He respected women. He valued their opinions. He involved them in decision-making. And some of his best collaborations were with women. He understood the male-female complementarity, and he used it well for the service of those in need. So here we go. There's Vincent. His parents and his family were peasant farmers. He came from the bottom of the pyramid. And there's Louise. Her family belonged to the French aristocracy. So their worlds were poles apart. Their relationship should never have worked out, but it did. And today, in 2021, they have much to teach us about collaborating and working with others who are very different from us. Their differences led to enrichment and creativity rather than competition and divisiveness. So Vincent and Louise, you could call them humanitarians. You could call them philanthropists, and yes, they were. But more than this, they were mystics of charity. A mystic can see beyond the chrysalis to the butterfly. A mystic can see beyond the acorn to the oak tree. A mystic can see the face of God in every human person. And of course, we all remember the lovely song in Les Mis, where, Jean Valjean sings, "To love another person is to see the face of God." So Vincent and Louise, their collaboration lasted 35 years because they were followers of Jesus. They shared the same faith and they owned the same gospel values. In fact, it was Jesus who was their role model, their teacher, their friend, and their mentor. The values of Vincent and Louise are built into every Vincentian service and project. These values are behind the why, the what, and the how of everything we do. So here we go: courage, compassion, humility, respect, gentleness, love. All the wonderful values that we treasure within the Vincentian family. And the services and projects which are part of the Daughter of Charity services have their values proudly displayed on their websites. And often an email goes around service staff with a footer reminding colleagues, our value this week is choice. is respect, is simplicity. So we want to know, where did Vincent and Louise get their values from? 3 gospel passages, which are known by everyone, regardless of race or religion, but 3 gospel passages which lie at the heart of our Vincentian family values are well known. Who hasn't heard of, I give you a new commandment, love one another as I have loved you, the words of Jesus. Again, who hasn't heard this wonderful statement from the Gospels, again coming from the lips of Jesus? Truly, I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. And our third piece from the Gospels, of course, is the parable of the Good Samaritan. This is probably the best known story that Jesus ever told. It is well known in societies the world over. In common parlance today, people still talk about being a Good Samaritan. We even have a well-known charity, the Samaritans, here in the UK, which uses the message in the story to help those needing an empathetic, listening ear. In a moment, we're going to hear the parable of the Good Samaritan, but before we do, it's important that we tease out the background of the story to get its full meaning. So first of all, we hear about the victim who was jumped on one of the most treacherous roads in the country. The journey on this ancient road from Jerusalem to Jericho was about 13 miles, and most of it was in desert-like conditions. It was a narrow, twisting road that dropped about half a mile in elevation, so parts of it were very steep. Given the isolated terrain, people on this road were easy targets for bandits who would have had ample hiding places and escape routes to the desert. Anyone who had the misfortune to be attacked on this route would have been utterly exposed and isolated, desperate for help. We also hear about the 2 people who passed by. One was a Levite, one was a priest, and they were members of the 2 holiest Jewish religious groups. They walked past and ignored the man who had been mugged. We know that the ancient road from Jerusalem to Jericho was so narrow that it would have been virtually impossible to avoid a mugged victim. But with callous disregard, this is what these 2 passerbys did. And the one who helped the victim was a Samaritan. He belonged to a people who were hated and despised by the Jews. The Jews believed that Samaritans had corrupted Judaism by marrying foreigners and incorporating their worship and customs into the Jewish faith. The last person to have helped the victim Jew should be a Samaritan. It's a bit like a wounded Celtic fan being helped by a Rangers supporter, or a wounded Palestinian Arab being helped by an Israeli soldier. So now I invite Sister Margaret to read the parable for us. So let's listen with fresh ears, fresh minds, and fresh hearts, as if we were hearing the story for the first time. Are you there, Sister Margaret? Can you unmute?
But The man was anxious to justify himself and said to Jesus,
Sorry, Margaret, sorry, can you begin? Because we missed the beginning.
that is the beginning.
Okay.
But the man was anxious to justify himself and said to Jesus, "Who is my neighbor?" Jesus replied, "A man was once on his way down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell into the hands of brigands. They took all he had, beat him, and then made off, leaving him half dead. Now a priest happened to be traveling down the same road, but when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. In the same way, a Levite who came to the place saw him and passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan traveler who came upon him was moved with compassion when he saw him. He went up and bandaged his wounds, pouring oil and wine on them. He then lifted him onto his own mount, carried him to the inn, and looked after him. Next day, he took out 2 denarii and handed them to the innkeeper. "Look after him," he said, "and on my way back, I will make good any extra expenses you have." Which of these 3 do you think proved himself a neighbor to the man who fell into the brigand's hands? "The one who took pity on him," he replied. Jesus said to him, "Go and do the same yourself."
Thank you. So we're now going to watch the story. This time we're going to see it acted without words. And as we watch, we have to ask ourselves the question, what does the parable, the story of the Good Samaritan, invoke in me as a Vincentian? So now we have a short reflection from Martin Luther King. The first question that, the first question that the priest and the Levite asked was, it was a very selfish question. If I stop to help this man, this mugged victim, what will happen to me? But the Good Samaritan reversed the question. He unselfishly said, if I do not stop to help this man, what will happen to him? Scripture scholars down through the centuries have meditated on this parable, and they point out that the Good Samaritan not only tells us about how we can be a good neighbor, but it also tells us about Jesus himself. In this story, we know that Jesus is both the Good Samaritan, the one who cares for his people, and he is the victim too, because he is one of us and he understands and identifies with our human struggles. So let's stop for a moment and look at the Vincentianness of the Good Samaritan. First of all, he saw the man and he perceived his needs. If we look in the letters of St. Vincent, I think it's something like 215 times he says to the person he's writing about some kind of poverty that and he says, I have seen with my own eyes. So here we have the Good Samaritan. He saw the man, he perceived his needs. Also, he was non-judgmental. He didn't say, oh, heck, here's a Jew, I'm a Samaritan. No way, Jose. He was non-judgmental. He was compassionate and sensitive. He was selfless, he was practical, he was hands-on. He put himself out, investing his time and his resources. The Good Samaritan went the extra mile. So here we are now in 2020, 2021. And for the past 18 months, the COVID virus has been with us. We've seen our shops and facilities shut down. Our towns and cities become ghost towns. Transport ground to a standstill. We know what it means being in lockdown and how it feels. We've listened to the 5 p.m. COVID briefings on TV as Professors Chris Whitty and Jonathan Van Tam have explained the R factor and taken us through the spikes and troughs of graphs and the mysteries of percentage pie charts. We've seen footage of the NHS under pressure from the virus, doctors and nurses in extreme PPE clothing, nursing virus-stricken patients struggling to breathe on ventilators. We have all had the experience of those close to us who've actually died from COVID. We have seen the impact of COVID on our residential and nursing homes. All of us have struggled with our own physical and mental health. We've been jabbed and double jabbed, and we need an NHS COVID passport to travel outside the UK. And COVID has affected the daughter of charity services. Here we are out there supporting the families of prisoners in Manchester. Many of the physical visits were not possible, and so much has had to go online. And indeed, the prisoners themselves have been on 24-hour lockup in their cells. Marillac Neurological Care Centre in Brentwood, where different members of staff or their families caught COVID, and there were staff shortages. Staff filling in and supporting one another. Staff playing all-team football. And then we had the St. Vincent's Family Project in Westminster, where services for parents and children were stretched and in many cases curtailed, and a lot of their activities having to go online too. The Louise project up in Glasgow, its drop-in centre for the Roma people had to close down. Services had to be taken out onto the streets for people. Food deliveries, locating IT equipment for children locked out of school so that they could receive their education from their teachers online. Vincentian Care Plus, struggling to keep its domiciliary service going. PPE clothing, the norm of dress code. And we've had to follow government regulations and restrictions too. Sorry, I think I've missed one slide there. Yeah. So besides Daughter of Charity Services, all the different groups within our Vincentian family here, the Passage in Victoria working with homeless people, the Society of St Vincent de Paul in Scotland, the De Paul Trust for Young Homeless, Noah working with homeless people in Luton, the Society of St Vincent de Paul here in England and Wales, our Vincentian fathers, the daughters themselves. We too have been severely affected by the virus, and we too have had to go the extra mile. All of us have had to follow government regulations and restrictions. We're all well aware of the signage, the masks, the gloves, the PPE, and the vaccinations. So all of us in the Vincentian family organisations and services have gone the extra mile this past 18 months. We've developed phone and online support for the lonely, outdoor exercise classes, nature creches outside, food banks and food deliveries. We've had yoga and wellbeing sessions online. We've had rainbow cookery parties online. We have exercised real sensitivity and caring for those we serve, and there has been enormous creativity in getting things up and running and ensuring that our services stay open. But hand in hand with the values of practical care and service, Vincentian justice values must always be present in our services and projects, paving the way for systemic change. And I'm going to put up now a quote from Martin Luther King. So here's what he says. Martin Luther says, "I admire the Good Samaritan, but I don't want to be the one. I don't want to spend my life picking up people by the side of the road after they've been beaten up and robbed. I want to change the Jericho road so that everybody has an opportunity for a job, education, security, health." So Vincentian values are expressed in standing up for justice and the rights of others in need. And I'm now going to share 4 examples from our family in Great Britain during COVID. So in Scotland, this is what the Louise project, this is what they did. Child poverty is rising in every local authority in Scotland. And along with more than 120 organisations, the Louise project, the Space, has signed up to ask Nicola Sturgeon to double the Scottish child payment now to help the 1 in 4 children in Scotland growing up in poverty. Here's another justice issue from the Vincentian care homes and services. They have supported the CQC in writing to the Department for Health and Social Care, suggesting ways to protect our elderly clients and alleviate their isolation. They have suggested visiting areas or pods where visitor and resident enter through different entrances and are separated by screens, such that visitors need not enter the care home. Other suggestions were outdoor visits with one other person and further support for virtual visits to encourage the use of video calls, to allow one family member or friend to be designated as a key worker and allowed to visit the care home, supported by regular testing. In the passage, they worked really hard for their homeless clients, and this is what they did. During COVID, the passage has been working with other charities and agencies to rapidly move its clients into temporary accommodation. The staff continue to support 148 clients in their 3 established accommodation projects and have launched a brand new food hub in partnership with other local charities. This has provided a vital mobile service distributing hot food and snacks 7 days a week to homeless people helped off the streets and now safely housed in temporary accommodation across Westminster. The passage is also a member of central government's Pan-London Emergency Response Task Force, responsible for helping hundreds more people off the street. And the passage sent an open letter to the Prime Minister requesting assistance from the government to 1, temporarily remove the legal barriers that exist for people receiving homelessness assistance. 2, provide a dedicated funding stream for local authorities to secure accommodation and provide ongoing support to people so that they can remain there. 3, provide COVID care and PPE for staff working in frontline homelessness services. And 4, provide local funding to assist people who are struggling to pay their rent. Again, work with asylum seekers pressing for justice issues. The Society of St. Vincent de Paul has welcomed the Jesuit Refugee Services report, Being Human in the Asylum System. The report sets out the principles for a fairer system for migrants and criticises the government's recent proposals for reform. In July 2021, the government introduced the Nationality and Borders Bill to Parliament. This landmark policy represents a worrying development as it will effectively remove the few available safe routes to claim asylum in the UK. The SVP has been raising awareness about the dangers this new bill poses to the lives of thousands of people seeking safety in the UK. Most recently, the SVP coordinated a letter signed by over 300 faith leaders, community groups and churches, raising our concerns with the proposed changes. The letter says, we believe a fair immigration system should be built on principles of protection and should safeguard the dignity of people. The SVP is currently seeking to influence the proposals in the Nationality and Borders Bill in the hope of creating an environment of welcome for people seeking sanctuary on our shores. So just 4 justice examples from the Vincentian family during COVID. And I'd like to finish now with a Graham Kendrick song, which is called A Little Bit of Love. And for me, it sums up what the parable of the Good Samaritan and what our Vincentian family and services are all about.
A little bit of love goes a long, long way. A little love, a little love, a little bit of love, and I'm on my way. A little love, a little love, a long way, but we'll get there together. A long way, but we'll get there soon. Along the way, we can lean on each other. A little love goes a long, long way. A little love, a little love, a little bit of love, and the sun comes shining. A little love, a little love, a little bit of kindness and someone smiling. A little love, a little love. A long way, but we'll get there together. A long way, but we'll get there soon. Along the way, we can lean on each other. A little love goes a long, long way. A little love, a little love. Little drops of rain can trickle down into a puddle, then the puddles get together, making streams that make a river. The rivers fill the valleys with a roaring and a rushing, then the little drops of rain have made a wide, 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 wide ocean. A long way, but we'll get there together. A long way, but we'll get there soon. Along the way, we can lean on each other. A little love goes a long, long way. A long way, but we'll get there together. A long way, but we'll get there soon. Along the way, we can lean on each other. A little love goes a long, long way. A little love, a little love, a little love.
Okay, so I hope everyone could hear and could follow the presentation and found something in it to relate to in their own Vincentian life. So thank you very much.
Sister Maureen, thank you so much for that presentation. I think you used your expert teaching skills and the fact that you're so rooted and based in the gospel yourself, and that you have this passion and deep love for both Vincent and Louise and for the heritage that we continue to share. So thank you very much. I think we'll all go away thinking about that reflection on the Good Samaritan. Thank you so much for your contribution. And thank you to all of you again who have joined us this afternoon. We look forward to perhaps welcoming you again tomorrow at the same time, when Mr. Jim O'Connor is going to be talking to us about his experience as a layman working in Vincentian organizations during many, many years. So thank you again to everybody who's joined us. God bless, and hopefully we'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you. Bye. Thank you.
It is.